As I wrote the material for the next video, I realized that not everybody knows what ES6 is, so with that being said, let's do an introduction to ECMAScript 6. First of all, you need to realize that JavaScript has a long and storied past, so let's cover a history of JavaScript quick. So a brief overview is that the language we know of today as JavaScript started out as Mocha and then transitioned very quickly into LiveScript. It then defined its standard API as ECMAScript. We still use this term ECMAScript to represent that standard, but the language is colloquially known as JavaScript. ES5, ES6, and ESNEXT. ES5, the definition of the language, was written in 2009. Its adoption has been rather slow, with most browsers only catching up roughly in 2012. ES6 was released in 2015. Alongside the release of the ES6, the team responsible for defining this ECMAScript standard stated that it wanted to do more iterations of this standard and define that period of defining as a year. Thus, ES 2015 is interchangeable with ES6. We might see that standard catch on more so, but I'll be using ES6 mostly throughout these videos. ESNEXT is how they define the next iteration of the standard that hasn't been named yet. So currently, ESNEXT is equivalent to ES 2016, which is currently being defined. The adoption of these standards has been pretty slow. As browsers have become more important in our lives, that adoption of these standards has become much faster. ES3 took about a decade to be adopted, and ES5, the last version, took about 3 years. ES6's current status is actually pretty impressive in my book. To view the current adoption levels, there's a table visible on Git that's being updated as browsers release new versions and they start passing certain tests. You'll notice that in that chart, there's a portion on the left called compilers and polyfills. This approach allows us to write ES6 and have it be transformed to backfill functionality into older browsers such as Internet Explorer 8, 9, 10, etc. The particular transpiler we'll be using is called BABEL. So we'll transpile our ES6 into ES5 to reach those outdated browsers. It has currently about a 71% ES6 coverage, which is relatively low compared to like Microsoft Edge and Chrome 52. Those are in the 95 to supposedly 100% range. I found that the BABEL transpiler actually supports the majority of use cases, and therefore we'll be using that to backfill that functionality into older browsers, instead of just saying we support the latest. In the previous video, we actually set up the Webpack configuration that execute this BABEL transpilation, and that code is available out on my Git page. There should be a link to it in the YouTube description below. More information about what BABEL is and how it performs its transpilation can be found on BABEL's site. These links highlighted in red can be found in the slide deck that's also linked in the description below. The future of ECMAScript. Personally, I don't see the use of transpilers and polyfills going away. The problem that the internet poses to browsers is actually extremely difficult. Each browser is being developed by an independent team, and each of those developing teams have their own approaches and styles to the problem. And these subtle differences could have an impact over the span of billions of web pages, and also devices and just the modern web. Plus, it's easier to define a behavior than it is to implement it, as any experienced developer knows. So the current order of ES6 topics that I will be presenting to you are going to be as follows, but they are subject to change based on my whims and laziness. Variable declarations, new methods on pre-existing prototypes such as the array and object prototype, arrow functions, ES6 classes, parameter defaults, promises, and lastly modules. So hopefully that little bit of history will give you enough to lead into these next videos, and I hope that you come back and check out my ES6 videos coming up.